Hey everyone, it's Jan from The Last Stitch. In today's video, I want to talk about something that I struggle a little bit with, and that is being grateful for all the good things that I have in my life. And that goes for sewing too, because even though I know that sewing is absolutely wonderful for me, I also have a tendency of often focusing on the next project and even being a bit hard on myself when things aren't going according to plan. So in today's video, I want to share with you amazing things that sewing has brought into my life. The first thing is that I think that sewing is an absolutely fantastic creative outlet. There are several reasons for that, because making garments, it's such a multifaceted creative pursuit. So we have to think of so many different things when we are pulling together this creation that will end up being a garment. So for instance, we have to think up what type of designs we want to use, research patterns, thinking about pattern combinations, what type of notions we want to use, detail work, and just building something with our hands, which to the outside person seems like magic, right? Because to us, it comes like a second language almost, sewing, once we got going. But if we think about it from an outsider perspective, I think that so many people are like, wow, how did you do that, right? So that is one of the things that, to me, sewing brings so many different aspects of the creative process into one single craft. And another great thing about garment sewing is that the creative process doesn't really stop with just creating the garment, right? Because the next step is wearing it, or pulling together different pieces. And so it's such a holistic way of living creatively, I think, when it comes to making your own clothes. So for instance, also of course doing clothes for others as well. It's just such a wonderful way of really combining so many different aspects from the creative tree. And those, of course, that are good at drawing and illustration, they can also have that aspect as well, right? When it comes to the creative process, they can design the garments, maybe learn pattern making. So it's such an expansive universe to go into sewing and really being able to pull so many creative strings at once. So that is one of the things that I'm so grateful for when it comes to sewing. Another thing that I'm very grateful for when it comes to sewing is that it has taught me patience and practice. Now, these are things that I have been struggling with my entire life. I am a fairly impatient person. I have a hard time reading manuals for, any type of machine or program or anything like that. I just want to dive in and not always do the appropriate research beforehand, because I just want to dive in everything and just do. But with sewing, because it really pays to be prepared, to have practice, done sample testing, and of course not doing everything so fast, because that's also where a lot of the mistakes happen. So I credit sewing for probably being the single most efficient tool for me when it comes to being much more understanding of the importance of practice and being patient and not rushing through things. Do the samples, do the research before you start a new project, testing, all those things. Definitely not ingrained in my personality, but I am happy to report that thanks to sewing, I have actually been much better at this, especially in the last few years, when I really have made like a very conscious effort on really embracing that slow, meticulous, methodical approach to sewing. So that's another thing that I'm very happy that sewing has brought into my life. Sewing has also been really empowering for me, and I think I mean that in several different ways. And one of the things that comes to mind is that sewing allows us to not having to try to fit in those quite narrow confinement of standard sizing systems. So for instance, sewing allows us to embrace our natural body shapes, because we have the tools of understanding that we can do different things to change the shape of a garment and turn it into something that will actually work with our body. So I find that extremely empowering. Another way that I find that sewing is really empowering is that we don't have to follow trends or being in the hand of what type of materials that are trendy right now. So for instance, right now there's a surge when it comes to a lot of synthetic materials such as polyester and stuff like that. And it can be a bit trickier to find natural fibers when you go into ready-to-wear stores. But because we have access to so many different fabrics to choose from, we can actually choose the type of materials that we like to use that feels good to our bodies, the type of colors that we like, not the ones that trend forecasters decide upon us. We can of course also make conscious and environmental choices in a way that we don't really have at our disposal if we're just the only option that we have is going into a store and trying to find something that both fit and is also eco-friendly. So there are many different ways that sewing really empowers us to make choices that better aligns with who we are and our values. So again, another wonderful thing that sewing has brought into my life. And I couldn't talk about all the benefits of sewing if I didn't mention the community. The thing that we have here, right, that has been one of the best things that has ever happened to me, especially with the birth of the sewing internet, because for the first 20 years of my sewing life, I did this pretty much solo. I didn't have any close friends that were sewing or anything like that, so I was very confined to just do my little thing, my little oddity that I was doing that no one else was doing. And what has happened now is that thanks to all the ways that we can connect all over the interwebs, right, we are able to meet regardless of where we are in the world. So we truly have a global community where we can share our experience, help each other out, and learn so much, encourage each other. And I think especially in a year like this, 2020, where the pandemic has kind of altered so many things for us, I think that having this kind of community and support becomes even more important. So I'm very glad that we already had this infrastructure, that we weren't always confined to meeting in person, right? And seek out other people outside from that, confined bubble that we are kind of all living in normally. So being able to connect with you guys this way has been extremely valuable for me. And it's definitely one of the things that has kept me going, especially, as I said, when I'm struggling, which I definitely do from time to time, both when it comes to sewing and in life and motivation and all that kind of stuff. So knowing that there is a community out there of like-minded people that share this passion, that is so extremely fabulously fantastic. Thank you so much for being part of this wonderful sewing community that we have out there. And speaking of sewing community and connecting on a global level, I also want to say that sewing has also taught me many things about the world. And through sewing, I've also become more conscious about topics such as inclusion, diversity, appropriation. So I'm very grateful for all the conversations, discussions that we have in the sewing community regarding inclusion, because it definitely helps understanding and evolve to really make sure, and that we check ourselves as well, right, that we act in a way that actually opens up people so that they feel that they can be a part of the community, which is something that is absolutely essential, but unfortunately sometimes for some of us easy to forget. So I definitely also want to say that if I sometimes in the way I speak or other things, I love to get some feedback on that as well, because English is not my first language, I am sometimes a little bit worried that I may be not using the right words to describe things, and in a way perhaps make some people feel not included, or in other ways I'm not expressing myself in the way that I intended to. So I'm very happy to get feedback regarding these things as well, because I definitely think that it's a conversation that we need to have, that we need to be open about and to listen, because the only way I think that we can create a more tolerant and open community is if we're able to listen to viewpoints and check ourselves and always try to do better. And the final thing that has been extremely valuable for me is that sewing has given me lots of solace in times of struggle. I've talked about this in other videos before, but I want to address this again, that I definitely think that for our mental health and our general well-being, I think that every human needs something of their own where they can devote themselves, that they can get satisfaction, joy, like a safe space, basically. I think that everyone kind of needs a hobby. I like to say that, and I definitely think that it's true, that we all need something that is truly our own. And for me, that is sewing my own clothes. And it can, of course, be lots of other things. But as I said, I definitely think that that is a thing that we should guard, because it will help us in so many ways when life throws us those curveballs, which unavoidably it always will, right? So at least we have this place that we can go into and really immerse ourselves, even though things are struggling and challenging. Especially, as I said, I'm recording this video in 2020, which has been quite a year, right? So again, I am so grateful that I have sewing in my life for that particular reason as well. Now, these were my reasons for why sewing has been so beneficial in my life. Now, of course, I would love to hear your stories. How has sewing helped you, and what are you grateful for when it comes to sewing? Please share your stories, because I think that this is such a wonderful thing to have, and I think it's also really good to remind ourselves about that. As I said initially, I am a person that is not always good about that, so perhaps we can make this video a celebration of all the things that we are grateful for when it comes to sewing. Thank you so much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you soon again.